Stapakaya ca dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine Stapakaya ca dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine Avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Asato ma satgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Today's topic: everyone is the architect of one's own being. It's a very important topic. Everyone is responsible for one's own upliftment. So, chances are given to everyone to improve oneself, to learn through experiences, and to build up character and get whatever you want. So, everything lies in the individuals. So, the doctrine of karma, which I am going to speak today, is the most impressive and significant conception of Indian philosophy. It is one of the tenets of Hinduism, doctrine of karma. You are guided by your own actions. Good, good, bad, bad. Enjoy whatever you want to. And you can't raise complaints. Everything is done by your own self. So, you enjoy the benefit of it, whatever you have done. So this doctrine of karma has had a practical bearing on the individual and his destiny. Not only does it give a real consolation in the sufferings, but also serves as a powerful incentive to habitual right conduct in the life of a person. The doctrine of karma is a logical, metaphysical, and moral principle. As a logical principle, it stands for the strict causal necessity between actions and their effects. As a metaphysical principle, it espouses the immortality of the soul. And as a moral one, it explains the diversity in the destiny of persons regarding their births and fortunes. So, karma plays a very important role in the life of everyone. The word karma is derived from the Sanskrit root kri, means to do. The word karma literally means that which is done by the efforts of an agent, as the root kri stands for all action. Thus, karma etymologically means action, work, deed, activity, all of which carry similar meanings and purpose. Accordingly, every action, manual or mental, that we happen to do is called karma. If you are thinking, that means you are engaging in mental activity. In Sanskrit, the word karma is used in many a different sense. Technically, it means the effects born of actions. It is the only meaning that we are concerned with in the doctrine of karma. Our actions produce twofold effects: tangible and intangible. The intangible effects are carried from one body to another by means of the subtle body, which survives death or decay of the material body for fruition. The capacity to transmigrate is acquired in one's lifetime, that is, between the period of birth and death. No fresh actions are accumulated in the subtle body between the period of death and rebirth. The fresh body that we assume after death is exactly what the subtle body had become eligible for at the moment of the decay of the previous body. The doctrine thus means that every exercise of the will in thought, speech, and action produces a necessary effect, good or bad, on the agent strictly in accordance with the nature of the act done, and thus this effect determines the future character of the agent's destiny. Karma, in the technical sense of effects of action on the agent's mind, is classified into arabdha karma and anarabdha karma. They are Sanskrit words. Arabdha karma is also called prarabdha karma. It is that portion of all the accumulated karma of one's past lives which has already begun to bear fruit. It accounts for one's peculiar birth, body, and character. None can escape from it without completely exhausting it by enjoying of its good and bad results. Anarabdha karma is the storehouse of those past, present, and future actions which have not yet started to bear fruit. It has been subdivided into sanchita, kriyamana, and agama. The karma that one had accumulated in past lives and is still in stock is called sanchita. The karma which one is accumulating at present is known as vartamana or kriyamana. Agami karma is that which one will accumulate in future. One has perfect control on anarabdha karma, which can be burnt to ashes by the fire of knowledge. Jnanagnihi sarva karmani bhasmasat kurute tatha, Bhagavan says in the Bhagavad Gita. The Indian philosophy loudly proclaims, as you sow, so you reap. The Upanishad says, A man becomes good by good actions and bad by bad actions. Punyo vai punyena karmana bhavati papa papeneti. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, good actions lead to good results and evil ones to evil results. Punyena punyam lokam nayati papena papam. It is another Upanishad dealing with this subject, Prashna Upanishad. There is another Upanishad which contends, whoever has qualities and is the doer of actions that bring recompense, he is the enjoyer surely of the consequences of whatever he has done. Assuming all forms characterized by the three qualities, treading the three paths, he, the ruler of the vital breath, that is the individual soul, roams about in accordance with his actions. One cannot escape from the fruits of one's actions. One will have to enjoy whatever one has earned. One cannot arrest the operation of the law of action. The good must needs bring the harvest of good, the evil of evil. The law of action binds the ignorant but frees the wise. So binding as well as freeing both lie in the law of action. It means it depends upon how you operate it. The soul survives bodily death and creates new bodies for its inhabitation. The impelling force for this is imparted by the actions it had performed and the knowledge it had gathered in its previous lives. The human body is in fact the kshetra or field in which we sow the seeds of our desires and reap the fruits of our lives. The fruits are according to the seeds sown and the care bestowed thereafter. And both the sowing and the reaping form an endless chain of cause and effect, the chain of samsara. The gentle but steady erosion of this chain is what is achieved by spiritual education, and its complete annihilation by the realization of Brahman. Slow as this erosion is, it needs not one but many lives. After the complete erosion of this chain of samsara, one attains to Brahman, wherefrom there is no return. Desire, in fact, is a root of samsara. He who continues to desire is subject to the inexorable law of karma and rebirth. It is the desire that pushes him to take birth in order to fulfill, in order to accomplish the desire which the agent, the person was aspiring for. He who, on the contrary, frees himself from desire gets liberated from the bondage of samsara. So the analysis of the doctrine of karma brings home to us many important points. Man in Indian philosophy is considered an autonomous self. Man or woman, but generally we use the word man. He is responsible for what he does. His actions build his character. The requital of actions is a fact that cannot be challenged. Man is amenable at every remove to the law of action. He assumes a fine body if his actions are good, and an evil body of his actions if his actions are bad. The soul is a creative entity which creates a newer and fairer body by its own activity at every change of body. At the moment of death, the soul collects within itself all senses and faculties, and after that, all its previous knowledge, action and experience accompany the departed soul. So it's very important how you conduct yourself in the present life. If you are careless, you have to pay very dearly for the carelessness. The falling off of the body is only for the building of a newer frame, either here or hereafter. The soul that transmigrates is a unity of moral and psychological tendencies as well as of all the elements that compose the physical world. The entire logic of karma and its effects is centered within it because it is an aggregate of the moral and psychological tendencies on the one hand and elements of the physical world on the other. The root of all its transformations is the desire of the being and the resultant fruition of it through will and action. Liberation from the bondage of desire and karma can be effected here by the right knowledge of the soul, which is Brahman. By the cultivation of penance, faith, chastity, knowledge, detachment, and equanimity, we can elevate ourselves to the region where the law of karma stops functioning and wherefrom there is no return to the cycle of birth and death. The doctrine of karma is not arbitrary, chaotic or capricious. It is a scientific and logical principle which governs the entire cosmos. It involves the law of causation, it involves the law of conservation of energy, the law of action and reaction, the law of compensation and the law of retribution. All these are involved in the doctrine of karma. It is a counterpart of the law of causation, or more precisely, an extension of the physical laws of causation to the moral world. The law that governs all actions, physical as well as moral, is a law of karma, which therefore is more fundamental and comprehensive than the law of causation, which governs only the physical actions. The law of karma is a cosmic law of moral causation, which directs and controls the process of an apparently physical causation and under which physical causation may very well be subsumed. Any work, any action, any thought that produces an effect is known as karma. Thus the law of karma means the law of causation of inevitable cause and effect. Wheresoever there is a cause, there is an effect. An effect needs be produced. This necessity cannot be resisted, and the law of karma, according to Indian philosophy, is true throughout the universe. Whatever we see or feel or do, whatever action there is anywhere in the universe, while being the effect of the past event on the one hand, becomes on the other a cause in its turn and produces its own effect. All things in the universe are at once causes and effects. They inhere the energy of the past and exert energy on the future. What we are and what circumstances we find ourselves in are dependent on what we were and what we did. Similarly, what we shall be and how we shall be circumscribed will depend on what we are and what we do at present. So, we have got tremendous responsibility to have a glorious future. Let it be noted here that karma does not bind a person exclusively. One has freedom to get out of the vicious circle of karma, which is the law of the phenomenal world. The only way to come out of the bondage of karma is to go beyond the limitations of law, to go beyond the realm where causation prevails. The doctrine of karma is not only an extension of the law of causation to the realm of morality, but also implies the law of conservation of energy. The cosmic energy is never destroyed, it only changes form. This was known to Indian philosophers. Their theories of karma and samsara bear witness to their recognition of this principle. The principle ensures that nothing befalls a person except as the effect of one's own actions, and nothing merited by a man by his own actions is lost unto him. All the values, positive or negative, resulting from a man's actions remain conserved for him and are capable of bringing happiness and suffering here and hereafter. The law of conservation of energy, as it operates in the field of science, can explain physical, mechanical and chemical actions which are bereft of moral values. It miserably fails when applied to human actions which possess moral value. Even if the law in question fulfills our intellectual demand for causality by expounding the uniformity and equality of action and reaction, it does not fulfill the moral demand for justice. There is no reason to believe that while the intellectual demand for the human nature is a reality, its moral demand is an illusion or a figment of the imagination. The theory of karma fulfills both these demands of the human nature by advocating the theory of twofold results, physical and moral, or outer and inner. The law of karma implies the law that like begets like, or that every action must needs be followed by a reaction of a similar kind. For example, if a man strikes a blow on the table will react upon him with equal force. If he strikes harder, he will receive a harder blow in return. As on the physical plane, so on the mental plane, all mental actions beget similar reactions, desires, motives, impressions, thoughts, and other mental functions being subject to the same law beget good or bad results, strictly in accordance with those mental actions. As all the mental actions determine the character of the agent can easily classified. It can be classified as good or bad. The character of an agent is again subject to the law of karma, because it is the aggregate of a large amount of subtle mental activities to which we give different names such as desires, motives, tendencies, impressions, ideas, thoughts, impulses, every one of which is governed by the law of action and reaction. Each character or personality is the sum total of previous mental actions and is also the cause of future changes in the character. All the discordances, disparities, diversities, and incongruities of life and character can be explained with a full scientific moral justification by the law of karma. The doctrine of karma implies the law of compensation. This is one of the fundamental truths of nature. As every effect must have a cause, so there must be an equal balance between a cause and an effect. A cause must needs beget an effect of similar nature, both in quality and quantity, and a reaction must needs be similar to an action. The forces of nature operate neither for profit nor for loss, but for a perfect equilibrium. If there be a flow of water here, there must needs be an ebb somewhere. If there be a surging of a higher wave in the ocean, there must needs be a deep hollow at its sides. If there be extreme heat in one place, there must needs be extreme cold in another. When it is day in India, it is night in America. A long peace is followed by a long war, and vice versa. Thus, polarity is found in all parts of nature and brings in the end perfect equilibrium, harmony, balance, justice. In a nutshell, it produces what we understand by the term compensation. As in the physical kingdom, so in the mental, intellectual, moral and spiritual kingdoms, the law of compensation manifests itself with equal force and regularity. There is no bargaining in the sphere of nature. What one wishes to receive, one must have to pay for first, in thought, word and deed. Something cannot be obtained for nothing. A thing cannot be evaluated properly if the effects are disconnected from their causes. The causes determine the nature of effects. If the causes be good, the effects are bound to be good. None can defy this law of compensation. The law of compensation covers the whole chain of our lives. If we look our lives as isolated events beginning with the birth of the body and ending with its death, we fail to find out a correct explanation. Instead, see injustice and evil at every step. But if we look at our present life in relation to our past and future lives, we see justice and compensation at every step. The broader the basis of reckoning, the more wholesome is the compensation. Therefore, if we wish to get a wholesome agreement between causes and effects, between actions and reactions, we must of necessity take a wider view of the soul life, which is it's a continuity of past, present and future lives. And reckoning from that standpoint, we shall arrive at a satisfactory solution of all vexed and complicated problems and affairs of human life. As every good action brings its own reward by the law of compensation, so every evil action brings its own punishment here or hereafter by the law of retribution. When a robber robs others, he robs himself first. He who deceives others is in fact deceiving himself first. None can do evil to anyone without suffering the evil effect of it in the end. The law of retribution is an inexorable necessity in nature. Every action reacts and brings its own reward or punishment, first in the inner nature and then in the external world, in the form of profit or loss, prosperity or adversity, health or disease. The soul apprehends the causal retribution, but we call the change in the external world retribution, which comes afterwards. This law reveals itself first in the soul and then in the external world. We have to pay dearly for evil actions, but not for good ones. Virtue, wisdom, truth, love, temperance, benevolence, non-violence, all are real good. They flow from one's real soul, and therefore none has to pay the penalty for practicing them. They are spiritual varieties. The more we practice them, the more they augment. He who desires material good must pay taxes, but there is no tax on spiritual good. The doctrine of karma is thus logical as well as scientific. It is the result of observing cause and effect, action and reaction of order, or the working of law in the universe. The critics argue that as the doctrine of karma works as an inexorable law, it leads to a hopeless fatalism and militates against the doctrine of free will in man, without which man cannot be held responsible for his doings, and there will be no ground for any morality. If man's present is thoroughly governed by and conditioned to his past, and if he is destined to attain only those fruits which his previous karmas have produced, it is not given to him to act otherwise than what he is made to do by the law of karma, or change in any way the course of its operation. As such, man not only loses all impetus, but is also absolved from all responsibility for his actions and becomes a helpless sufferer of the inevitable consequences of his past actions. From this, the critics conclude that the doctrine of karma espouses fatalism. They identify karma with fate. One scholar has said, over and above human energy and free will, Brahmanism placed destiny. Thus, the doctrine of karma is misunderstood by those who criticize it as based on fatalism and predestined necessity, and further say that it leaves no scope to the freedom of will and consequently encourages a life of pessimism, indolence, and inertia. Before we enter upon the task of refuting unwarranted and unjustifiable charge of fatalism against the doctrine of karma, it is necessary to have a clear notion of what we understand by fatalism and freedom. First, we should know fatalism is defined as a doctrine which asserts that all human actions are predetermined by some foreign agency, personal or impersonal. It is a doctrine which leaves no room for the exercise of freedom. Freedom, on the other hand, does not mean caprice or uncertainty or indetermination. It is not the negation of autonomy, but of heteronomy. It denotes self-determination, to be determined by extraneous agencies. In what one does is not to be an autonomous agent, but to be determined by oneself is to be an autonomous self. In this perspective, we propose to examine whether the doctrine of karma is indeed fatalistic or whether it at all leaves scope to the exercise of freedom. It is not fatalistic. Dr. Radhakrishnan has said in one of his works, what looms over us is no dark fate, but our own past. We are not the victims of a driving doom. Suffering is the wages of sin. There is no question that such an idea is a great incentive to do good conduct. Karma, rightly understood, does not discourage moral effort, does not fetter the mind or chain the will. Another scholar, Professor Hiryanna, very great scholars of Indian philosophy, he has remarked, the point that is important for us is that whichever be the explanation we adopt, the doctrine of karma is not fatalistic, and it neither excludes personal effort nor destroys the sense of responsibility. According to Professor Mahadevan, far from meaning fatality, karma stands for the freedom of man's will. Another professor writes, the law of karma is not imposed on man's life by any external and irrational power like fate or destiny. It is an internal law of our life itself, which states that man's moral actions produce certain modifications in his moral life. Just as a psychological law states that man's psychical activities or experiences produce certain effects or modifications in his mental life. Another scholar maintains that the moral doctrine or action does not admit of any extraneous element in the administration of the moral law. And in the words of another scholar, there is nothing fatalistic in the law of karma, which only means that those things which the individual sets in motion by his conduct in life must ultimately come back to him. These learned observations amply prove that the doctrine of karma is not fatalistic, but it may be objected that though we are all responsible for whatever happens to us at present, we are not in the position to change the course of our past karma which lead to these happenings. To make this objection, we have to refer to the law of retribution, which we have already discussed. Whatever we voluntarily do will sooner or later bring us the fruits we desire, and there is no way to get rid of them. What we sow, we have to reap. That is, the doctrine of karma denotes not only that our actions and events of life are determined by their antecedent causes, but also that there is perfect justice in the rewards and punishments that befall to our lot in life. The law of karma is not a blind mechanical law. It is in essence ethical. The implications of this idea of retributive justice are that the doctrine of karma is rooted in a moral view of the universe, and that it therefore commits man to the obligations of a real moral life. It points out to the fact that there is an ideal of human life, which it is the primary duty of man as man to pursue, and that it can be realized only through constant efforts. In other words, the doctrine postulates the possibility of moral progress, and the conclusion to be drawn from it is that freedom is not only compatible with, but also in fact demanded of it. If man were only a creature of his congenital tendencies, altogether helpless to rise above them, it would be poor comfort for him to know that he was not a victim of any foreign agency, fate or destiny. This does not, however, mean that he can do away with the results of his past karmas. His life in this respect is characterized by the absolute necessity, and he has to bear all the good and bad effects to which they may lead. One has to bear them. They are predestined results from which he can never emancipate himself without enjoyment. So far, karma undoubtedly implies necessity, but as mentioned above, it implies freedom as well. That is, in the field of moral progress, only it should not be supposed that the interests of life will thereby become divided, for moral progress is in this view to be made the final end of all actions. By thus adopting the betterment of one's moral nature as a goal of all efforts, one may become indifferent to what happens in the present as a result of past karma, though unable to avoid it. This is the eternal message of the Gita, that action is one's duty, not the reward thereof. Ma phaleshu kadachana. That verse. One ought not to have any attachment to action, nor should one desist from action. Self-conquest ought to be the sole aim of action. Karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma palahetur bhuma te sangostva karmani. Thus the law of karma, far from denying the freedom of the will and moral responsibility, is just grounded in and rightly insists upon them. If one is now to reap the fruits of one's past actions, that is because one was responsible for them in the past. And if it was given to one to determine one's present position by one's past conduct, there is no reason why one should not be able to determine one's future by one's present efforts. But all this means that one has in oneself the freedom to do in certain ways in order that one may accomplish certain results. The law of karma only stipulates that given such and such actions, such and such results are bound to occur, just as from certain physical causes and events, certain physical effects inevitably follow. It does not paralyze one's activities, but puts them under this general command. Do this and you will attain that end. Refrain from doing this and you will not suffer that evil result. The doctrine of karma no doubt admits of a certain amount of determination, but not at the cost of freedom. It postulates determination, but it is not to the exclusion of freedom. There are many stories told in the Vedic and classical Sanskrit literature which illustrate the victory of moral and spiritual endeavor over the rule of fate. For example, in Kathopanishad, famous Upanishad, we study the story of Nachiketas. He was consigned to death by his angry father, but by the power of his strong will to spirituality, by resolutely sticking to the path of spiritual well-being in preference to the path of material prosperity, Nachiketas conquered death and accomplished perfection. Again, in another place, Mahabharata tells us the illuminating story of the princess Savitri, Satyavan Savitri, a famous story. Savitri, the only daughter of the great king Ashwapati, who was fated to be a widow after a year of her marriage with Prince Satyavan. By her moral and spiritual endeavor, she rescued her husband from the mouth of death and thus broke the fetters of so-called fate. The life of Karna, another great character in Mahabharata, he fought against the dictates of his fate with this firm conviction that birth is determined by destiny and that man can change his destinies by his efforts. Man is no doubt responsible for his past karmas, which determine his present state, but it is up to him as a free agent to overcome the influence of his karmas by making sufficiently determined efforts with devotion, dedication and service. That's why it's very important to know these ideas so that you can change the course of your journey. The course is somehow you must turn your mind towards spirituality. In the initial stage, you may feel very difficult, but as you keep practicing, you feel it is becoming more and more easy. The very foundation of the law of karma is that everyone is the architect of one's own being. That is, everyone is responsible for the actions done by oneself and one's enjoyments and sufferings, births and deaths. They are the fruits of one's own actions. So this law, eternal as it is, predestines nothing and no one, but on the other hand, making everyone a free agent for action, shows the way out of the world of misery and receives reward or punishment as results of his thoughts and deeds. Whatever happens to him in this life, he has to submit in meek resignation, for it is the effect of his past undertakings, yet the future in his hand, and he can work with hope and confidence. He has cognitive tendencies to change by his efforts the given circumstances, inner and outer, and mold them to his own end. He is a builder of his fate. He can make or mar it. He can work his way to the realization of his highest goal, or may resolve in the incessant possession of births and deaths. So, in a way, the law of karma forces you to learn the value of life, forces you to find out the goal of life to be accomplished. And it is through actions only you can go either to the hell or to the heaven, either to bondage or to freedom. Actions are responsible. So how you act every moment, how you build up your character in the course of your present life, that determines your future birth with the same tendencies which you have progressively pursuing in this life. They come into operation in your next life. So one has to admit this coming back and forth in life. That means it is not for simply you are coming back and forth. You have to pass through all sorts of hurdles. Sometimes happiness, sometimes unhappiness, sometimes more unhappiness, more suffering, more and more suffering. The reason is all these things happen in order to give an awakening. You have to awaken yourself. There is no way. In order to give that awakening, all this law operate upon the individual. So one has to put maximum effort. That's what Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Abhyasa Yoga, constant practice. By constantly remembering the spiritual ideas, you develop strong tendencies which will pave the way for freedom. That is why in our scriptures it is mentioned that every day you must sit and introduce spiritual ideas into your system. Every day it must be done. It must be done first. As soon as you get up from the bed, after ablutions, you must sit and read some spiritual texts, some noble ideas, so that those things go into your system, into your mental stream. It has got double effect. It cleanses your mind. At the same time, it makes your good impressions more strong, by which you will be able to face the problems and crises in the life. All sorts of problems come. There is no life without problem. No problem means no life. Problem means life. So, if you know this truth, you don't have to worry then. Worrying will not free you from the suffering. So, worrying is a sort of weakness. Swami Vivekananda says, the remedy of weakness is not brooding over weakness, but thinking of strength. Think opposite way. For example, you find there is a small fire somewhere coming up. Immediately put water, some drops of water, it puts off. Fire is put off. But if you allow some time, the fire becomes strong, then you require more water. If it is a huge fire, you require huge gallons of water. So the nature has got all the things. Antidotes are there. So if the bad thought comes just in the beginning, nip in the bud itself. Immediately replace them by good thoughts. If you allow them to continue, the bad thoughts will pull you so much. You have to exert strong force. You require more strong spiritual ideas to counteract them. So that means you have to effort yourself. Purusha Prayatna. That's what Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. You have to make effort. By doing effort, you will recognize the grace of the divine power. It may be invisible, but it is visible in the form of grace. God is visible in the form of grace. That grace you can recognize when you make effort. If you are sitting idle, if you are not taking steps, then you won't feel the grace at all. Then there is no way but suffering. Suffering and suffering. Until you learn. That's the point. There is no end for suffering. Please note that. It is like a bottomless pit. No bottom. More suffering will be there. Much more, still more. No end. Anything in this world goes to infinity. Bliss, no end. That's why the highest joy one gets by the realization of God is Ananda, which is indescribable. Infinite again. It's compared to Ananda Sagara, Satchidananda Sagara. That's why one goes to Samadhi, because he's so excited, he doesn't want to come back. He just absorbs himself, merges in that Anand. So, infinity, you are part and parcel of that infinite. Taking different births means you are taking different forms, but even though you are being born again and again in so many ways, you are inseparably connected to the source. The source is God. We are all inseparably connected. That's a very important point. If there is no connection that way, you can't have the scope to realize the truth, to realize the reality. So, if you engage more and more in the world, that means you are going more and more in a crooked way. Going in a spiritual way means straight way. So, the doctrine of karma is like a law. By studying that law, you must operate yourself in a wise manner. That's why all the Upanishads have come. The Vedanta teaches that. It teaches the potential divinity of individual soul. Each one is potentially divine. What a grand truth. So, we should set our goal in that way. Be spiritual and make your life blessed. With these words, I conclude my talk. Thank you very much. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May the Lord protect us. May He nourish us. May our knowledge be illumined. May we not hate each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.